during that 12-month period, I was so focused on the directive to get relisted that I deployed such an autocratic form of leadership that I became a bit branded as a dictator. It was, get this, I need this now, you didn't do this right, those kind of things. And in hindsight, I spent the next 2 years, so twice as long, rebranding myself as a multiple leadership style person capable of doing so much more. I think the other thing that I learned throughout that period that really shaped my career is when to get excited. There's a time to go into someone's office hot, and there's a time to go in and say, hey, I have a concern. How can we work to alleviate this concern? And so I may have gone from what, some people refer to as the Chicken Little moment of the sky is falling, the end of the world is here, to, hey, I'm standing under a tree. Maybe that's an acorn that just hit me in the head, but the sky is not falling.
This is Inspiring Women. I'm Lori McGraw, and I am here at the Nashville Sessions Conference, and I'm speaking with Crissy Carlisle. She is the CFO of Summit Behavioral Healthcare, where she's been since January. She is a many-year executive, and as a senior executive in financial roles, we're going to talk about the importance of financing and healthy organizations in these challenging times. And Crissy, thank you for being on Inspiring Women.
It's my pleasure. It's an honor to be here.
Well, we're in this kind of crazy booth. I mean, we're in this fishbowl kind of thing.
In the middle of the conference.
In the middle of the conference. Everyone's staring at us. We look fantastic. Don't we look fantastic? Crissy, let's just talk about Summit. I mean, you have so many years of experience in senior executive roles as chief financial officer, as an investment person. Why Summit? Why Summit Behavioral Health?
Yeah, so I think it's important when you talk about me and my leadership to understand my personal mission statement. Mm-hmm. And that personal mission statement is to walk by faith, give with a generous heart, and make a difference in the lives of others. And so when I'm looking at opportunities, I kind of keep that in the forefront, right? And can I make a difference here? How does the organization make a difference? And so when the opportunity to work with Summit Behavioral Healthcare and to be part of helping to solve some of the societal problems with mental health, it was just a no-brainer for me.
So we're going to talk about the organization and what you're doing there. But I'm going to spend a lot of time sort of digging into leadership because, my view is that in these complex times, there has never been a more important time nor a better time for women to boldly lead like they have never led before.
That's right.
So, Crissy, why don't we just start with a little bit of the bio sketch, sort of how did you get here? You're no stranger to healthcare. You're no stranger to leadership. You're no stranger to high stakes types of organizations and situations.
That's right. So I started my career at Pricewaterhouse, now PricewaterhouseCoopers. I think one of the things you would learn is that I like to go with companies who change their names a lot. And so I was with Pricewaterhouse for 10 years, spent 7 in audit and about 3 in corporate recovery. And when HealthSouth, an organization, some people may recognize the name, they have the distinction of being one of the largest frauds in American history. When they had their issues, they were honestly having trouble recruiting people to the state of Alabama. That's home for me. And so between the opportunity to move home as well as to use my corporate recovery skills, I took that opportunity and spent, 20 plus years with that organization now known as Encompass Health. My first role there was as the director of SEC reporting. And when I left 20 years later, I was the chief investor relations officer. And when I left, part of the reason I left was they were spinning off their home health and hospice division, and I had the opportunity to take them public. And they asked me to go out to Dallas and be their CFO. So I spent about 3 years there before moving closer to home and to family back here in Tennessee to be the CFO of Summit.
So, Crissy, most people, when they're dealing with those kinds of complex, high-stakes situations, they would run away. They would say, okay, this is a little bit too much pressure cooker. You leaned in, and that led to more and more advancement in terms of what you did. Why did you make those early choices to lean in?
Yeah. So I think those first 10 years with Pricewaterhouse when you're consulting, and I would often hear from my clients, you've never been on this side of the table. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Lori, it really kind of upset me saying, well, have you ever been on this side of the table? I became a little defensive early on in my younger years. And so when I had the opportunity to go and be on the other side of the table in a situation where I was going to be building the SEC reporting team, processes, everything from scratch in a high-stakes environment, I did lean in. I saw it as a challenge and an opportunity to prove myself that I could be on both sides of the table.
Talk about advancement in leadership, and particularly with your finance skills. I mean, those are multidimensional. There's not just like one type of financial leader. So what were the skills that, became most important for you to develop? Not just the, sort of like academic skills in terms of like, being able to, whether it's audit or whatnot, but that was important to you to develop to not just be a financial person, but a leader at the level that you are.
Sure. So if you go back to those days at HealthSouth, I was still relatively young in my career, and the directive that I was given on day one when I walked in was, get us relisted. And if you think about that situation, so I started there in 2005.
And you're just like, huh?
Yeah.
How's that happening?
It was about 2 years after the fraud had been detected and the FBI had raided the building. So that tells you the extent of everything. And the CEO and CFO looked at me and said, you got 12 months, go. And so I think we filed about 6 or 7 years worth of Form 10Ks in 12 months, and we got us relisted. One of the biggest takeaways I had from that moment, Lori, was, yes, you always have to know which leadership style to deploy in the situation. But even when you make the right choice, there's consequences. And so during that 12-month period, I was so focused on the directive to get relisted that I deployed such an autocratic form of leadership that I became a bit branded as a dictator, right? It was, get this, I need this now, you didn't do this right, those kind of things. And in hindsight, I spent the next 2 years, so twice as long, rebranding myself as a multiple leadership style person capable of doing so much more. I think the other thing that I learned throughout that period that really shaped my career is when to get excited, right? There's a time to go into someone's office hot, and there's a time to go in and say, hey, I have a concern. How can we work to alleviate this concern? And so I may have gone from what, some people refer to as the Chicken Little moment of the sky is falling, the end of the world is here, to, hey, I'm standing under a tree. Maybe that's an acorn that just hit me in the head, but the sky is not falling. And so I went from Chicken Little to now people say, how do you stay so calm in these situations? And my response is generally years of practice. The other thing that I had to learn was, again, from a finance perspective and coming from that Big Four background, is I had a wonderful CFO in that turnaround situation who said, Crissy, you've only managed people like you, degreed people who are up and out mentality that want to, drive their career. And I know you can, but you've got to show us that you can manage other people. And so he asked me to be head of accounts payable. And when you think about an accounts payable or a shared service department, you've got some degree, some maybe 2 years, and some people who start right out of high school and spend 50 years there. And I remember in those moments getting to know that team and saying, hey, we need to do these productivity factors better, faster, stronger, and setting goals with them and saying, okay, when you meet this first goal, what's the reward you want? And they thought about it and they came back and said, we want to wear jeans. And to me, that's not something I would have thought about or cared about or prioritized at all. But it was that moment in my career where I go, it's really important to understand what motivates each team separately. And I've tried to take that with me now that I'm in the CFO chair and have multiple shared services departments, multiple degree departments, that are highly technical, in managing that both as an accounting and finance organization, but also at the department level.
Crissy, I want to go back and dig into something that you said about sort of that 1 year of hard charging, and you called it Chicken Little, but being labeled a dictator. But I actually know, there are so many women who, really launched their careers by taking on an almost impossible task and breaking down every door possible to accomplish it. The thing that's interesting to me is that moment that you recognized you wanted to change a skill set you had and rebrand yourself. How did you have the smarts to do that? And how did you consciously go from sort of like being known for one thing and then deciding that to be the leader that you are, you wanted to widen, broaden, be different than what the last year had been for you?
Right. There was a lot of one-on-one time spent going to other leaders throughout the organization and spending high quality one-on-one time inside and outside the office and talking through this. Making sure that as I took on new roles, that I took the time, no matter what the deadline was or how prioritized or whatever leadership style I needed to deploy, ensuring that whoever I was working with understood the why. That has been the one, crucial thing that I always take with me is I say, people don't always have to like the why, right? They don't have to like it, but it's critical that they understand the why. And so taking that time one-on-one or in a group, preferably one-on-one, and making sure they understand the why. Why did I have to deploy that leadership style? This is what I would like to do. This is why that deadline's important. How can we work together so that we don't have to go back to that situation? I think that served me well during those 2 years.
It's also just, quite frankly, it's something that many people don't do. Once you get labeled or branded to be a certain thing, to go about and consciously try to change that thoughtfully and effectively is the thing. I find that just so impressive in terms of how you approach that. Let's fast forward. Let's go to where we are today at Summit. And so you have all of these years of very varied experience, and we're also in really complex time. There are reimbursement challenges. There are policy changes that are happening at a pace that I don't think anybody understands right now, let alone being prepared to react to or advance their organization. So at this moment in time, all of the experience that you have, what are the key leadership skills that you're bringing to the table today that are serving you well?
Yeah. So I think in this current role, it really is that strategic role of the CFO in making sure that we work together as a team, and that as CFO, my job's not just to manage cost and get reports out the door. It's how do we work collaboratively across the organization to make strong investment decisions that ensure more patients can have our high quality care at the time they need it. I really spend a lot of time talking with my team and other executives about it's not about getting rich and famous. It is about serving our patients and serving them very well. And when we do that, everything else falls out. And so I spend a lot of time, looking at where are there underserved markets and what is the reimbursement there? Where do we need to spend our, legislative lobbying dollars to make sure that market gets served? For the communities we already are in, how can we serve them better? Making sure that our local teams are engaged in the community and understanding their needs there and serving the community as well as the patients.
So I'm hearing that calm that you're talking about, Crissy, that you're bringing to the conversation. But you use the word strategy and strategic leadership. And so when did the strategy part? Because no people with financial degrees, financial skills, strategy is not the first thing that's top of mind for many of those positions. When did strategy become part of your skill set? Was that also a conscious choice, a leadership choice that you made, or did that just come naturally, based on this other things that you were doing?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. Again, that same CFO who, challenged me to learn to lead people not exactly like me, also said, the other step is that becoming a visionary leader. And so, took several executive level classes on that, very intentional with my process. And then really, what I have done is I have always built a team around me that says, who doesn't think like me? Mm-hmm. Who can handle the day-to-day activities that frees me up to do something different, to think strategically, and really challenge myself. But you're absolutely right, Lori. It was a conscious decision to say, I'm not going to do the day-to-day work anymore. I'm going to build the team around me so that I can think strategically and lead them to execute on everything else.
Those are some of the hardest things to do as you're moving up in any organization to, sort of like, when you're good at what you do and not doing it yourself, but then to move to like thinking about strategy is so important. The other thing he said, and not enough people do this, to bring on team members or leaders as part of your team who are think very differently than you, who will challenge you in ways that is so great. So Crissy, when we met before what we're doing right now, you talked a lot about over the years, being in really, really important organizations, large organizations, complex organizations. You were very often sort of one woman at a table, two women at a table. So that's been a part of, your leadership journey. And you spend a lot of time helping others and advancing others. I know that's really important to you. Can you speak about that?
Absolutely. So, let's talk first about what it was like realizing you're the only woman in the room. Mm-hmm. When I was with all those years at Pricewaterhouse, the organization was very different, right? They were very focused on diversity and bringing more women in as they were watching more and more women choose accounting and other financial related fields in college. And so I don't feel like I noticed it as much there. But once I became, my first chief title was the Chief Investor Relations Officer. And so when I would go to an investor conference, I bet 80%, if not more, of the people with whom I met were women.
More.
They were men, right? Yeah. And so I found myself reminded of several things. One, I would kind of give myself a pep talk before those first few conferences until I got comfortable with that. And I would remind myself, all those men, they came to hear what I have to say. Mm-hmm. And they're here to hear me and what I have to say about the company. And it's like, okay, I'm good at that. I can do that. But probably the most important part was it reminded me, who am I bringing along with me? And what can I do differently to ensure this role is expanded? And so I focused on that. Throughout the course of my career, I've, had right hands that a lot of times that are women. And tried to say that. I remember taking a woman with me to an investor conference, and she had that moment. We walked into the room to have breakfast, and I saw her looking around. She was fairly young, and I didn't say anything other than, get comfortable with it. And she said, okay, yes, ma'am, But it's really those moments. The other thing that I have found very helpful is you got to make a connection as a woman. And for me, I don't play golf. I don't collect bourbon. But I am a proud graduate of the University of Alabama. And so I can talk college football with the best of them. And once we found that common thread, it just became another relationship, right? Male or female. And so I think that's another thing that maybe the university gave me they didn't intend to, and unacademic learning. But I think that's something that I encourage people to do also, is find that common ground, whatever it is.
And it's also like, we did talk about how family and football, like that is your jam, that is your weekend, that is your life. You've got the flags, you've got all the gear.
That's right.
And so that balance of just sort of, having something personal and bringing that to who you are in building a business and work and leadership is so important. And so, Crissy, as you just think about sort of these next generations of women and, actually anyone who is moving into leadership, what are the types of things that you're advising others today so that people don't have to relearn the things that you learned over your years so far?
Absolutely. Well, I'm actually mentoring a young student at Alabama right now. I think it's very important to pay that forward. And, some of the things that she and I are talking about is that, get comfortable. It's okay. Find the common connection. I'm also, teaching her things like it's okay to have self-care. When you're balancing being a mom, being a wife, being a sister, being all these things, being an employee, being an executive, you have to still prioritize you, whether that's, making sure you get to the gym ever how many times you want to go. I often tell people that I'm a better mom and wife and all because I go and get my nails done. That's my 2 hours every few weeks, right? But the other thing that I would say, Lori, is I had a sorority sister in Gamma Phi Beta. She was a leadership professor at the University of Nebraska. And she taught me very early on in my career to remove the phrase, I don't have time for that, from my mind. Mm-hmm. And instead to replace it with, that's not a priority today. And that has really served me well. You know, I went to Duke's executive weekend program every other weekend for 2 years while still working full-time at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I deployed that every day. But I encourage women to, and men as well, right, to really think about everything they do in terms of their priorities. And you can put it into play in a really simple example. So if I'm at home and I'm staring at a sink full of dirty dishes, and my child comes up to me and says, Mom, will you read this book? I'm likely not to say, I don't have time for that. I need to clean the kitchen. But if you think about it and say, you're not a priority to me, then it's just not going to, it's going to make you think, right? And you're going to say, those dirty dishes are just not important. Mm-hmm. What is important is spending time with my child, helping him or her develop their reading skills. And so everything else falls away and you get your priorities straight. And so I would challenge, I challenge women and I challenge men to do the same thing. Think of terms in what is my priority for today? Is this a priority or not?
That is such strong advice, and also helps with the, multitude of competing priorities that everyone deals with. And there's strength in owning the action that goes alongside that. Yeah. So, Crissy, this is such a great Inspiring Women conversation. Let's close out with your best advice to emerging leaders.
Well, I think it is take every moment in and assess. Look back. What did you do well? What do you still have to learn? Look at the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. They're timeless. Think through them. You don't have to do all of them well, but if you aren't good at one of them, surround yourself with someone who is. Build that team around you and keep your priorities straight. Everything else is just noise. That's something that we're working on right now at Summit. Is we have 5 pillars of people, service, quality, growth, and finances. And if it doesn't fall in one of those pillars, it's noise, and we let it fall to the wayside.
And don't forget your football.
That's right.
This has been a great Inspiring Women conversation. I've been speaking with Crissy Carlisle. And Crissy, thank you so much.
My pleasure.